Welcome everyone to the second day of the Maple Leaf Mystery Conference. We'd like to say a special thank you to our sponsors, Sister in Crime Toronto, as well as as well as Crime Writers of Canada. And we want everybody to make sure that they check out the conference bookstore, Books and Nooks, all week to see new books being added. And first up, we have Rick Mofina, interviewed by Del Chatterson. Take it away, Del. Thank you.
Take it away. Did I hear you say? Hello, Rick. Nice to see you. Almost in person.
Hi, everybody. Hi.
So let me also say thank you very much to the Maple Leaf Mystery Conference and Mike Martin, his staff and volunteers for the great work they've done. I'm already looking forward to next year. And it's a pleasure to work with them and today to have a conversation with Rick Mofina. We've tried to get prepared with an agenda. We have a list of questions that we've reviewed. Of course, I've answered some of my own questions since I sent it to you, Rick. But let me start with introductions. People that are here, I can't see how many are here, but oh, I see 88. And the chat room, I guess, is activated. I see chats there already. And just to give you, we have an hour as I understand it, so we'll chat until 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, depending on what time zone you're in. And I'd like to conduct the interview as more of a conversation between Rick and I, between authors and readers, writers, and others that are interested, and we'll see where it leads. So we do have an agenda, but we'll meander through that agenda, and we'll also give time to the audience. If you want to put your questions in the question and answer section, the Peyton will get back to us with and insert those questions in the second half of the hour. We'll spend 30 or 40 minutes together and then go from there. So let me first introduce myself and Rick Mofina. I'm Del Chatterson, Delvin Chatterson, author, if you want to look me up. I'm a Crime Writer of Canada author member, and have published 3 novels, thriller novels, but aren't nearly as good or highly acclaimed and sold as Rick Mofina. Rick Mofina is one of our outstanding, highly acclaimed, multiple award-winning thriller writers. He's got more than 30 books, I think. Is that the right number, Rick?
Oh, maybe, well, I lose track. 30, 31.
Okay. It's a lot, very prolific, plus a few collections of short stories, some novellas. So we'll talk about the full list. I've had the pleasure of reading a couple of the recent ones, The Lying House and Her Last Goodbye, which I think is the most recent, isn't that? That just came out this year.
Goodbye. That's the most recent, yes.
Yeah, and so I'm very impressed. I've already posted my review. Rick is recognized as one of the best thriller writers in the business, and is clear. It starts from page 1 and takes you right to the end, continuing to follow the twists and turns, the suspense, the mystery. It's quite an accomplishment, every book I've read. And we'll talk a little bit more about them. And if you've read a little bit of the background on Rick Mofina, you know that he's a former crime reporter, journalist, and has had experience everywhere from the Middle East to Canadian North. He's worked with LAPD, with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. He's visited Middle East, wars in the Middle East and terrorism here or there and elsewhere, and interviewed murderers on death row. So he's got lots of experience that leads to some good novels. But I think the best way to introduce Rick Mofina is to talk about the very enthusiastic praise from other authors and reviewers. Just a quick scan of what I've seen today. Praise for the novels of Rick Mofina. Swiftly paced, entertaining with authentic details of police procedure. Tense, realistic, and scary in all the right places. Another riveting read from one of the leading thriller writers of the day. A powerful, gut-wrenching thriller. bursts with suspense. The action is so intense, the writing so realistic, it's as if we were there. This is a book to cause icy shivers. Guaranteed to keep readers flipping the pages. Rick Mofina's tense, taut writing makes every thriller he writes an adrenaline-packed ride. Tight and excruciating suspense, a winner. A blisteringly paced story that cuts to the bone. Its brisk pace and tight focus remind me of early Michael Crichton. A thriller with no speed limit, it's a great read, according to Michael Connolly. 6 seconds moves like a tornado, according to James Patterson. Some of the other quotes are from Tess Gerritsen, James Rowlands, the Toronto Sun, National Post, RT Book Reviews, Midwest Book Reviews, Dean Koontz, and James Patterson, as I mentioned. So it's not family and friends. These are other writers, critics, very, very well recognized as an outstanding writer, Rick, and it's a pleasure to work with you. I also want to give you credit as a fellow Crime Writer of Canada member. Rick is very generous with his time and shares his experience and helps other writers do better. So that's what we'd like to learn today, is a little bit more about Rick and his books. So maybe we can start with a quick bio. We know a little bit about your books and we'll talk about them in more detail, but maybe can you give us a quick recap, other than the bio that I've already read or presented, in 25 words or 50 if you need, your life story. You're born and raised in Eastern Ontario, I think. What was your education, career path, and when did you become a full-time writer?
Well, I think it started in first grade when the teacher said, now class, we're going to write a story. And I learned the concept of how to make stuff up. and I'd had stories read to me at bedtime by my mother, my aunt, and it just was a magical thing. And it's something that stuck with me. I always knew I'd be writing something creatively from the get-go, I guess, when I was, I don't know, first grader, second grader. High school, I was the only boy in my grade 9 typing class. All the other girls looked and said, what are you doing here? I thought I needed to learn to type if I was going to write. Isn't that what writers do? And I was sending off short stories back in the day, and
it was a good,
that one picked up, and yeah.
And you were a professional at age 15, I read.
Yeah,
your first published short story.
Yeah, I would ride down to a local magazine store, and I wouldn't even buy them. Well, on occasion I would buy the magazine, but I would thumb through this magazine called The Writer, which blew my mind. It was telling you how the technical aspects of writing and the writer's market at the back, and those of us who are old enough to know what an SASE is. So I just sent off stories, and they would come back with rejection slips. One came back with a check, and I was 15. And that was magic. And
that's the first happy ending story. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's interesting. You make the distinction between writing and storytelling, and I think you know successful writers start as being good storytellers.
Yeah.
You recognize that skill and interest and exploited it. What was your career before you became a full-time writer?
Well, I was, I guess I grew up in Belleville, Ontario. I guess you'd call a townie. After high school, half the kids went off to university and college, and the other half stayed around town. And I worked in factories and stuff. And one of my best friends, he went off to university. He said, you know, you're intellectually lazy. You should go off to school. And he would give me his university reading lists. And when I was working some shifts in a factory, there was an unemployed English high school teacher who sat beside me, and he started feeding me books. And that combination, I actually probably then tuned into what I should be reading, and then went off to university a few years later and studied journalism and English lit and existential lit and religious responses to death. And that suited me for a job in journalism as a crime reporter. I went into that to facilitate my interest in creative writing. I thought I have to experience things to see what I might write about. And once I landed on the desk, yeah, that was it.
That's it. That's interesting. Yeah. Where did you work as a journalist?
Let's see now. First summer job was the Toronto Star. I was a bit overwhelmed as a Cub summer student reporter at the Star. There was a lot of talent there.
Hmm.
As a matter of fact, that group went on to, one guy won a Pulitzer, one guy ran the Globe and Mail, and a few others. But anyway, the Toronto Star, then I made my way to Calgary, got out the Calgary Herald just before the Winter Olympics, and pretty much stayed there for 10, 13 years, and a few years on the National Bureau in Ottawa, covering politics and traveling quite a bit.
I see. It's interesting. I have to digress into my story. I tell about journalism and how your career started in high school. My career as a journalist ended in high school. I walked into the journalism class, and the teacher said, "Chatterson, get out of here. This is the vocational program. You're in the university program." So I went to university, became an engineer, did an MBA, and 50 years later, I started writing. So
there you go.
I spent a lot of time, but like you, I kind of recognize that storytelling is what it's all about. And I've used that in consulting and management and some business books. And that was the next question. I've had a challenge of going from business writing to writing crime fiction novels. How do you find did you find the transition from journalism to writing fiction? I know you said that your style is a journalistic style, and you compare it often to Thomas Harris, I think, the author of Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, well, yeah, and maybe Hemingway-esque, because I read everything by Hemingway when I was younger because it was so accessible. And then I moved on, of course. But yeah, journalistically, I learned a lot of things journalistically, and a lot of novelists came up through the journalistic tradition. I think for me, it was on several levels. You learn storytelling, you learn to get to the point of the story. The actual style, as Tom Harris was with the Associated Press, short, tight sentences, but he turned them into poetry if you really were to dissect his work. But you could see the foundations of the Associated Press style, sometimes just 3 sentences to a paragraph, things tight. I like that. Elmore Leonard is very plain. I like that sort of thing. So in a way, that journalistic style was drummed into me, and shifting point of views in different chapters, because as a journalist, there were always about 20 sides to a story. So when you fell into someone's life or dropped into someone's life, you became a sponge and picked up details really fast. So
Yeah.
I like that style. I think for me, it was my boot camp.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think you're at that stage where journalism was more about storytelling. I discovered, we did a course in engineering actually, where on critical reading, and the course textbook was the Time magazine, and they kind of explained how every article was a story, that the opening paragraph and the ending paragraph tied together. And so we learned a lot about structuring an article or a story at that stage. And you've certainly mastered the craft from journalism to fiction. When did you actually make the career change and take up writing full time?
Well, I was, I think when I left university and got on full time in Calgary at the Herald in the run up to the Winter Games, and then after that I was pulled on to the the night cop desk. And if I timed my sleeping properly, I had a whole day to myself, and I knew that was the time to really knuckle down and write. So I plotted a book. I decided it would be crime fiction. I liked the newsroom drama. I liked the fact that it gave you lots of opportunity as the way to get into the story. And by then, Michael Connelly was doing it, Laura Lippman was doing it. There were quite a few journalist authors. So I was doing this privately, secretly. Only my wife knew. No one at the paper knew. I was never one of the people that went around in the newsroom saying, I'm going to write a book, or I am writing a book. To me, it was a private thing. So if I failed privately, but I was going to do it. I was going to write it. And then once it was done, I was going to get an agent. I was going to follow that tradition, or that structure. So that's what I did. So I was writing from 88, like
Oh, really?
always writing, but from 88, I was focused on
And
what I was.
but your first book was published in 2000?
Yeah, it took a while.
But that's
Well,
because-
I should interrupt that. I had chances to write some nonfiction crime books that sort of
Okay.
diverted things a bit. I wrote a piece for Penthouse magazine that, and I was going to write a book based on that. It was a serial killing case, and I wrote a piece for Reader's Digest on a nonfiction crime case. But you know, it was easier for me to write fiction. You don't have to worry about all the legal issues, and I was already doing journalism full time anyway during the day, so
Okay.
fiction was the way to go for me.
Okay. And then after the first book was published, you switched to full-time writing?
Oh, I was still. What had happened was, well, I was always working both jobs. So I was when the first book was when I got an agent. And long story short, and she placed the book. Got quite excited. I remember that phone call. My wife called me. She said, well, "You got a fax from Millie." That was my agent in New York. She said, "We have an offer on your book, and can she call you?" So there I am in the newsroom. Nobody knows, and she called me from New York and said, "You know, Kensington wants to buy your book." And I said, "Before you say another word, Millie, can I get a new car, or can I get my brakes fixed?" And she said, "You can get your brakes fixed." And I was on cloud nine then, and I went to Ken McGugan, who was our book editor, and I pulled him out privately, and I told him, he was the first person I told, because I was doing book reviews for him at the time and author interviews. And he said,
Okay.
"I always knew you were up to something. I knew you were up."
Your secret life revealed.
So that got me full-time writing, but I still had to keep a full-time job, day job. And it wasn't until I actually maybe retired, and I am retired from the day job, and I'm still writing full-time.
Okay. Did you keep writing nonfiction and journalist articles? No.
I dropped nonfiction. I have offers and chances to do projects, but and I was tempted a few times, even recently on another one. But no, I think I like just sticking with I'm in control with the fiction.
Okay. Well, let me ask you about the wide range of books you've written. I noticed that you've got a number of standalone novels. You had, I think, 4 different series with 4 to 5 different novels in each series. You've had some novellas, which I guess are short novels, and you've had collections of short stories. So how have you gone back and forth through all those, or which one are you doing next, or have you decided to focus, or do you enjoy the variety?
Well, just to mix things up a bit, I started off, my very first book was to be a standalone. And then the publisher said, "Can you bring back your characters, make them continuing characters?" So that turned out to be a 5-book series. Then they said, "Well, let's start with something fresh. Marketing would like a fresh series." So started another series. And then I left that, switched publishers for, a better opportunity, I suppose, and landed with a big standalone. But I wanted to go back to series, and they said, "That's great, do it." So I started another series. I have 5 series altogether, but in between standalones. And right now I've had the last few books have been standalones. The publisher's been happy with the standalones, and they're fun to do. I like that. As most writers know, there's the pros and cons, if you will. With standalones, it's always fresh, it's always something new in that story. And with series, it's comfortable because you've created a world that people love and want to stay in. And you like it too, because unless you move your character to a new building or a new apartment, you might be able to change, say, "I'll go to IKEA and get something different for the," it's pretty much the same place.
Yeah, it is a different style, and to use the same characters over, it saves you some imagining new ideas. But it's actually, you're speaking of characters, I noticed in both books that I read, what was remarkable to me was you include a lot of characters. It's usually a family story, a tragedy, a missing person. And so you get to meet all of the family members, and then you introduce the good guys and the bad guys, the cops and the criminals, and then the neighbors. And there are a lot of characters that you introduce, but you do an outstanding job of making them all stand out separately. I had a reader told me one time that it was too complicated to keep track of all my characters, so you need to put in a sort of a program up front, who's who. And I don't find that's necessary at all with your books. All of them.
Oh, well, thanks. I know it's you feel like a plate spinner on the old talent shows. You know, some people do like it, and some people absolutely hate it. Some people, I hear from them. Some people prefer first person, you know, one or two characters or one character guiding you through, and others don't mind what I would call an ensemble cast.
Okay.
And I think for me, the trick is trying to make them all relevant where they need to be relevant. They all have a role to play, just like in a great movie, I guess. It's easier when it's visual. There's not too much mental work involved. But I mean, nobody complains about the huge cast in a movie because each character has a role to play. But I think also, I'll go back to the journalistic tradition, is that there are always lots of people for me to interview to get their points of view. There are the main players involved, but everybody, in my view, when I'm doing these stories, serves a role. And but it's true in terms of how far you need to go. You know, like I remember James Patterson saying, you know, if the guy's just holding the door open for you, you don't need his life story. You might not even need his name, but he has to be there to hold the door open for the character. But if he does come back later, then you have to have something identifying and then layer him in, as it were, or her, whoever. But again, I don't mind the ensemble cast, but they have to play a role. They have to serve some kind of purpose, even if it's a minor role or a cameo appearance. Because in life, people matter. So, you know, you pay attention to things. So
yeah, it's an interesting approach. And so you've declined to do first person or a shorter list of characters?
I don't think I can do first person. I have been asked to tighten up the stories in terms of, you know, reining in the number of characters where necessary. I'll give you an example, is that I know from my days as a crime reporter and detectives and police friends who are retired, and how things go in a case status meeting, as they call it. You'll have a number of investigators around the table, because if it's a big case, that's how it works. And I like to stay true to that. And some editors will go, well, do we need to know every detective from every agency and every case? Just say there were, you know, I don't. And I thought, well, that's just cheap if I just gloss over and go, there were a lot of people in the room. That's sloppy writing. So, you know, I could say, you know, various agencies are represented, and whoever speaks has to have something valuable to contribute. So I've tried to discipline myself in that, reining things.
It's interesting. Yeah, I found the same. The difficulty for me in switching from business writing to fiction is that you have to put in a lot more detail. Yeah. Instead of just, you know, get to the point. What is it you're trying to tell me? Tell me what you're going to tell me, and then tell me what you told me, is kind of the approach to business writing. But in fiction, I have to expand on everything. It does matter. What kind of car was he driving? What color was it? Did the door open to the left or to the right? And so it's hard to get the right balance of detail without detracting from the thriller element, the action, or the conversation that keep it moving forward.
I have to say, Del, I have been blessed with great editors who will do some strikeout and see if this works and that sort of thing. And I'll do it myself to begin with and go back. And I know that's right, with the first draft, you overwrite, and I see it in my own, and I don't worry about it. You go back and make the writing better. And I am pruning quite a bit. And I know that the reader wants to move along with what the story, what's relevant, and don't go out of your way just to make some kind of joke or to show off that you know something that really is not relevant. It's only when things come into play. I used to, in some of the writing panels that I've been on, I would liken it, for me, to the story. It's like when you see a whole bunch of kids, say from a nursery school, walking by, they're all hanging onto the rope. The story is the rope. You might have all kinds of different little kids. different personalities, different attitudes, and they're all, and you can get by all of them, but they're all hanging onto the rope, and the story is the rope. So
yeah, it keeps moving everybody together.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. But how do you make this when you have a story in mind that you want to tell? How do you make the decision between a short story, a novella, and a full-length novel? Because even some of your novels are from 300 pages to over 500 pages. So,
I guess it's a conscious. If I sit down to write a story now, I took Before Sunrise was actually a short story, and I expanded that into a novella because I love the story and readers like the story. And the same with I haven't done it yet, but with Lightning Rider, which was an armored car heist in Las Vegas. The short story was an Arthur Ellis Award winner. But many times I hear from readers who say, "Oh, pull that into a novel," because they like the characters.
oh, yeah.
So that's, if I do stretch something, it usually goes that way. But when I set out, I haven't written short stories in a long time, unless I'm invited to do it in an anthology. And I usually say, well, can I just give you one of my previously written ones? But no, I don't
remember that conversation.
Yeah. So no, I'm sticking pretty much with novels right now, and I do have I'll let this out now. I've got a trilogy that should be coming out at some point this year. A new reporter series, trilogy of novels that are about 50,000 words, 60,000 words.
Okay,
So we're working on that. The covers are pretty much done, but that'll come out.
Okay, a trilogy is another definition of a series, but only 3. That's what that means?
That's it. It's a fancy way of saying a 3-book series.
Yeah, that's it. More literary.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good. That's interesting. We got, have you had any short stories that you've actually rewritten as a full novel, or?
Yeah. Before Sunrise, I took.
Oh, it was published as a short story and then as a novel.
Yeah, then I stretched it into a novella, and I really like that one. It's a dark story, but I get a lot of interesting comments on it.
Okay, when we talk about the plots and the characters, do you have a file folder full of good ideas or characters that you're going to use somewhere, or plot lines or stories that intrigued you when you were a crime reporter? Or?
Yes, always. It's usually in my head or written down somewhere in one of my folders. Always, you start off with something and sort of beat it out, as it were. You say, "Oh, this could happen, that could happen," and then you set it aside. But usually, I like to walk every day, a couple of times every day. That's when I usually get the voices going.
Okay.
And what about this? What about that? And then, you set it aside. You might come back to it, or you're really hit with, "Oh, this is really great. This will work." And then you like every writer, and you wake up the next day and go, "No, it won't. That's a house of cards. That won't work."
And so you reject the whole project, or you just rewrite?
You sort of forget about it, and then something will come back to you, say, on that, and go, "Remember that idea? You thought, well, what if you did this?" And suddenly it's reinflated, and you're thinking, maybe I could. And that's sort of how it goes for me.
Okay.
But I look for a skeleton of reality, a foundation of truth, all the cliches, either from my reporting days, what I've heard, what I've seen, or what you imagine, or something, like everybody, you draw from everything. So
yeah, that's it. It's important to have an interesting life and lots of experience to make up stories from that.
Or talk to your neighbors. I mean, sometimes they're just mentioning something, not for me. They'll be just telling me something like that. And like everybody who writes will go, "Hey, I could use that. That could be something."
Yeah, that's interesting. And do you have several projects that are under development, and then you proceed to the finish line with one, or do you choose one and then take it to the finish line?
I'm trying. Well, the short answer is yes, I try to just focus on one. But the lie of that is that I was writing the trilogy in between the contracted standalone books. Publisher was aware, and they knew. They said that we worked it out so I could publish these myself if I wanted, and retain all the rights to them. Publisher didn't mind, as long as I didn't bring them out at the same time as my legacy publishing books. I'm a hybrid author in that regard because I've got the rights back to some of my earlier works that I control as well. So
Okay. So some you're publishing directly yourself.
Hmm.
I see. That's interesting.
oh yeah, I have quite a few colleagues who have big, long lists, some with 50, 60 books, and they have had help getting the rights reverted, and they self-publish those as well. It's just to keep them alive. The stories are still good, and they're finding new readers all the time. So
Yeah, no, that's a good tactic. And you've been very productive in 20 plus years. You've written 30 plus books. Do you have a plan or a process for keeping them coming? Or do you have a commitment to the publisher to deliver one per year or something like that?
As I always say to other authors, you know, the contract obligates you to be inspired. So so you keep going, and the contracts are good. They're, you know, the deadline, you know, everyone who has contracts, they know the author will deliver on these days. Okay. My process is, I'm fortunate to they still keep offering me contracts to do more books. So I adhere to that, and I just keep chugging along, and work on one, then start thinking about the next one. When I have one under control, I usually start thinking about the next one, and it just sort of is the handoff, almost like a relay in a way, and just keep it going. That's my process, and I like it. It keeps me busy.
Okay. And do you have parts of the year where you schedule to write heavily and take time off, or do you break between books?
Well, right now you might call it a break between books. I hate that kind of thing. When you're really working away on a book, and I'm sure colleagues experience this to one degree or another, it's hard work, and you're right in the battle of a book, and you're thinking, oh, I would love to be done so I can just do nothing. And then when you are done and you're doing nothing, you're going, oh, but I wish I was working on something, because you sort of miss that. So I try to keep it going. As soon as I'm done another one, I mean, there's revisions, there's page proofs, there's things to go through, but you're always working on the next one.
Yeah, and there must be some overlap as you're doing final edits and reviews and started the next one.
Always, yes, and of course, once you submit, and I'm sure we've all heard this or felt this, is you sort of are done with the book, and and then when it comes back to you, you go, well, what's this? Did I write this? Who? Because you're already starting the next one, and you get excited because you always want to do a better book. The next one's going to be even better, and you want to challenge yourself or try something different. Like for me, the one I have coming out next April is a standalone with a tighter cast and a smaller stage, deeply psychological, and a few other things thrown in. They've already just today, I think, they put up the selling page for it, which is almost a year in advance, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I see that more and more now. We're getting advance notice of pre-order. So you're saying you're inspired and motivated by the contract. Yes. To what extent are you also driven to meet the expectations of readers? They want the next book, they want it to be this kind of story, or is that also part of what motivates you to keep going?
It's in the back of my mind all the time, is that I want to entertain you as a reader. I want to tell you a story that I know you're gonna love. It's going to be great if you understand it the way I understand it. So the job for me is to convey it that way, put it together that way. I mean, just like the Archer, you always fall short. You feel you always fall short of what your ambition is. But for me, I want to give the reader the very best experience. For the commercial fiction is what it is, commercial genre fiction.
Commercial fiction.
So and I'll use the word, even formulaic. Of course, you can't deny it. That's all true, but you want to be the best craftsperson you can, and you want to get them the best story that you can. So that's what I drive myself for, is that with every paragraph, every chapter, every, you know, when I go back and I really go hard at it, was it Harlan Coben said, it should be, the tension should be in every sentence, you know, almost, which is true.
Yeah, and that's what the reader's expectations are. You think they're looking for
I
the
think so,
continuous
because
action?
I think so, Dell, because that's what got me going. Those were the books I like to read that just drove me, you know, page turners. That kept me, if I read them at night and at bedtime and my adrenaline's going, I can't sleep. And that to me is a successful storyteller for my kind of book. That's why I read classic literature, which is great at bedtime. And I read thrillers during the daytime when I need to stay awake. So, but that's what I go back to is, and what really is helpful is the emails and feedback you get from readers when you're having a bad day and you get just some fantastic. They're like when you're running the marathon and you think you're out of gas. There's somebody on the sidelines cheering you on, and you just, oh, thank you, you made my day, and it really does help. Well,
that's it, and you're primarily motivated with the thriller element of the book, and it's like my favorite review is the one that said it's a great read. I had to get up in the middle of the night to finish it.
Yes, I like. I like. Yes, and of course, a thriller. The characters make them relatable. I will inject some of my own experience. We all do. They're biographical to a degree at some point, or at all points, or wherever it works. You know, my family might recognize something. I'll put it in the book, and they'll say, "Well, that's Cousin Joe, or that's Aunt so and so."
You do have to find a way to make it entertaining for yourself while you're writing it. I agree. The inside joke. Yeah.
Well, there's that. Plus, if it works, or if it's experiences that have been difficult, but you know are real and work, and you can convey that. So
yeah. What about your relationship with the readers? I know that what the appeal is the suspense and the thriller and the plot development, but what about the mystery element? Do you find you're sort of in a contest to tease them through to the conclusion and send them false leads? And is that going through your head all the time? Is this too much? Is this?
Yeah, I mean, there's, I guess in the early books and right through almost present ones, I mean, I just sort of write the stories with a few little things thrown in, but then where the readers seems to create, in many cases, their own red herrings. I went, well, I didn't even intend that, and I never meant that, but if that's what you thought. And I think what that is even when my wife and I will watch a great suspense movie, and we'll be guessing about this and that. And that's what readers, they watch every detail. And I do too, when I'm trying to figure, oh, is that important? Will that be important? And later, you're absolutely correct. You were right on, you're so smart. Or it had absolutely nothing to do with what you thought. It was just there. So, there's that element. But readers are very, very sharp and they pay attention. So, but you know, you can never cheat them. Of course, you must always be true to them. And there have been, you know, if I put something in there and it's there and some people went, oh, I missed it, I had to go back, and it does fit perfectly. Oh, you're such a master. And others who say, well, I knew right off what's going on, and maybe they did, I don't know. But
yeah, I think you did a masterful job. The one that I just read, her last goodbye, was there's a few details you think, there's the clue, or you meet a new character, you think, he did it, now I know what happened. And then you say, no, that was wrong. Why did he tell me that? So it's an interesting game. It makes it fun for everybody to read the book, and hopefully for you to write the book. But the other question I was going to ask, though, is because you're writing thrillers, do you avoid any sort of digressions into social commentary or that kind of thing? Is there any informational or inspirational or moralizing that you include as a hidden message?
Well, I think off the top, no, I try not to do that, but sometimes the characters will speak up on something. But I don't write message books. But you know, if real life creeps into something, but I try not to, you know, be too preachy or anything. Try to let circumstance and events and just the human condition speak for itself.
Exactly.
But there have been times when I wanted, and I discussed it with my agent, I want the book to have this thread or that thread. I don't know, don't go there. I mean, it's not that
Yeah,
I
I think
want.
it's
kick
good
off
to
a reader.
avoid. My editors are quick to point out that that's not necessary. You don't need to add that.
Yeah.
People don't want to hear that. But
Yeah.
the other thing is that I think you do a good job of, and it's, again, part of your masterful technique is that the lessons of life are there, and I can see in your dedication. And a lot of the stories are about family disaster or dilemmas or death and danger that they're having to resist, and there's always a little bit of a backstory about lying or keeping secrets or trauma in the past. And so there's kind of lessons there of how the lessons of life are in the story if people pick it up. But I'm going to take a time out now and ask, where did Peyton go? Peyton can maybe read us some of the questions or give you an idea. I guess we can click on Peyton, are you there? Or yeah, I guess here's a question I see from a listener. Are your stories do you think of your stories as more character driven or plot driven?
Both. They're both. To me, they're like shirt and pants. They go together. You can't have one without the other.
Yeah, I think it goes back and forth.
Yeah.
Another question I see, sorry to interrupt, the Peyton is there now. I think we can't see the audience, but we can see each other. So we're shooting blind. I hope we're hitting the mark occasionally. The next question I had kind of is, what about making your books audiobooks or other formats? And what about making your books into a movie? Have you had some experience in that area?
Well, audiobooks are sub-rights that are offered to the audio publishers. And
Okay.
all of my books are available in audio. As for movies, I have in the past been optioned. Stories have been optioned. We have had interest from time to time. Nothing has been, come to fruition. Nothing in the works right now, but that has happened for me from time to time. The TV and film interest.
Okay, Peyton, go ahead. If you see some questions there that I've missed,
Yeah, thanks, Del. So Rick Judy from Oakville is wondering how your career in the newspaper influenced your crime writing.
Well, as I was saying to Del earlier, is that when you, as a crime reporter, you're usually dropped into the lives of people at their worst times. And so you learn to observe and soak up all the detail you can, which I hope I convey in my fiction writing, so that when I'm having characters experience something, I can draw on what I have experienced, what I've seen others experience in the most dramatic times you can imagine, from disasters to tragedies to you name it.
Thank you. And Mary from California is wondering, do you ever get chills yourself when you're writing a book? She says she knows I do when I'm reading them.
Yeah, there's an occasional time when I will finish a scene or finish something that I'm aiming for and go, ooh, that kind of scares me. I like that. The flip side of that was sometimes when I wrote, I'll give you an example. Here's the story. I wrote a scene that I thought was very scary. And my wife is my first reader, and she was in the other room with her pen reading my manuscript, and I'm the hovering husband. I'm in the kitchen, I'm watching her, and I knew she was at the part which I thought was really scary. And then I could hear her pen on the paper going shh, shh, as she X'd it out and giggled. She goes, that's not scary, that's silly. So I failed on that one. So you win some, you lose.
That's a tough review from somebody who loves you.
Yeah.
Yeah, family are not always good at reviewing you, being honest.
They're the most truthful.
Yeah, sometimes they're too cruel.
And Rick, where do you get your inspiration for your books? Amy from Toronto is wondering.
Oh, from all over. As I said to Dal, from conversations with neighbors, just observing people in situations, thinking back on stories that I covered, or seeing things and reading about things. They come from everywhere. They'll come in the middle of the night. They'll come, at bedtime. They'll come anytime. And you'll just sort of hang on to an idea and just see if it grows. It's like a seed. And if it really grows and you start thinking about other elements, it might come to fruition as a possible book.
Can I ask a two-part question and insert one among the others here? Rick, you have a pretty good understanding and you do engage with your readers quite regularly, I notice. Do you have an understanding of what your most enthusiastic readers have in common, aside from liking your books and the style of your books? What would a typical reader, who would a typical reader be?
Oh gosh, I can't really say. I really don't know, because I don't know their backgrounds and all of that. Only that,
yeah,
I think they come from all over.
a pretty wide-ranging audience, international audience as well.
Yeah, I got emails from New Zealand the other day. I've had them from all over, Iceland, Iran, all over the US, Canada, the UK, Australia. No, to me, there's no typical reader in that. They just look for a good story and voice. So if my voice works for them and the story works for them, then we get along just fine. Other readers, they let me know, not so much. That's fine. It hurts, but that's fine. That's life.
Yeah, and if you look at Amazon, it says if you like this author, you'll like Rick Mofina. Who would that author be, or who would those authors be?
Gosh, I don't know. Maybe.
You haven't asked your readers?
Well, a lot of people, James Patterson will say, if you like a James Patterson story, like a Harlan Coben story. I don't know if that's just tagging or the whatever algorithms, if I'm saying that correctly. That,
Yeah.
but I don't. To be honest, I don't know. I mean, the same genre, pretty much. Those of us in the genre.
Yeah, I find there's some similarities with Harlan Coben in the sort of domestic drama and tragedy, crime, not domestic terror, but not domestic terrorism, if you like, in some of the ones I've read. And I know you cover a lot of different subjects, from the apocalypse to international spy stories. So it's quite wide ranging, your subject matter, and your stories are all good.
Well, thank you.
Peyton?
Yeah, we still have a couple more questions here. So Jay from Victoria is wondering, have you ever set any of your books in Canada?
Yes. Before Sunrise starts in Canada and moves to the US, I haven't set any of the books totally in Canada, but a lot of my books have huge Canadian settings. Their Last Secret starts off in Manitoba. 6 Seconds has a Canadian Mountie who's the protagonist. So yes, yeah.
And how long does it take you on average to finish a book, to write?
Well, I would say, on average, about 7 months, 6 to 7 months.
Do you find you have to do a lot of research, or are you now drawing on your own experience and knowledge?
Oh, it depends on the book. It varies from book to book. With Free Fall, which was about it's an airline thriller, I did a lot of research, a lot of technical research. When I wrote Search for Her, I flew to San Diego and drove the route that my family takes from San Diego to Las Vegas. And I spoke with police in San Diego. I spoke with the FBI in Las Vegas. From time to time, I'll still do the old journalistic thing and talking to people, depending on what the technical challenges are of the book, and because it just helps me if I figure I'm on safe, solid ground in terms of where I'm going to land the story. Okay. Other times, I don't need to do that so much because it doesn't require it, depending on what the story is.
And you just do that for authenticity, or do you find that you use the information to educate the reader on?
No, it's not so much for the reader, it's for me. Because if, for example, in Search for Her, This was a story where a family goes from California to Las Vegas, and their teenage daughter goes missing near Las Vegas. And then there's elements of the story, the crime in San Diego and elements in Nevada. And that I didn't know about jurisdiction, who would lead, who would follow, what detectives would travel, what agency. And I thought that's where I needed help. I needed to talk to police in both jurisdictions to sort me out. And that really helped. It really did help.
Oh, that's so interesting. And so Rick, if you weren't a writer, what profession would you be in?
I used to dream about being a Formula One race car driver. So I thought my first name would work in that field. My first legal name is Ricardo, actually.
Great. And the last question that I have here for you is, do you write on a daily basis? And if yes, what inspired you to write daily?
The answer is yes, and contracts. In order to keep pace and meet the deadline, I would write every day. I still do, 24/7.
Then I have to ask the question. I'm worrying about you working too hard. And what do you do about work-life balance?
No, well, now that I'm retired, Del, I'm in charge, and I don't do word counts. I didn't really do, once I got the contract, I never did word counts. It was just working every day, moving the story. Even on the worst days or days when you couldn't actually write, or there were other commitments, job, family, that you just, but you stayed in the book. As I say, for me, even if I'm thinking about it, or even make a note, like short notes to myself on busy days, I know I'm still in the book. I'm keeping it going. So that's the 24/7 aspect. Even on Christmas Day.
Oh, really? You don't take a break to go golfing or fishing, or no? You say hello to the family once in a while?
No, I work it in. I mean, I have to say I've been blessed with an understanding family, but yeah, it's awful, because
no, it's not awful. It's admirable, your dedication and your work ethic and the process. Yeah, that's it makes a difference. It makes for a good book, and a lot of good books. So I congratulate you again. Anything else we should know, or anything you'd like to admit that you haven't told us yet? No admissions. No true confessions in your books.
No, not that I can think of. No, I would say I owe everything to my family and my wife, who was when I was writing the very first book, and halfway through, I got self-doubt. I let her read it in progress. She went to the kitchen and she read and read and read, and she came back and she just said 2 words to me: finish it. And I said, well, what about that? What about that? Yeah, oh, finish it. That was it. So I thank her for that.
But I think we're near the end of our session. Any other questions that you wanted me to ask that I forgot to ask or neglected to ask?
Oh gosh, I think you've done a great job. I really think I want to thank everybody, everybody with the group for having me, inviting me to this. It's such a pleasure, such an honor. So thank you so much, and for everyone who signed on. It was really, really nice. I see people from all over signed on, so thank you very much. I appreciate this.
Yeah, well, it's fun for us too, and we thank you, Rick, for giving us your time. You've been very generous from the first time I contacted you with your time and advice and suggestions, and helping other writers and communicating with readers, friends, and fans of your work. So we appreciate it. Thank you very much, and congratulations again to a Maple Leaf Mystery Tour. They're doing well.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Del.
thank you, everyone.